Hi, I'm Casey Evans, Senior Knowledge Exchange Manager in the Beef and Lamb team within AHDB. Today I'm joined by Jason Rowntree from Michigan State University, and we're going to be talking about soil carbon storage in the context of climate change. How are you, Jason?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Good. So, to start us off, I was wondering if you could give us a quick overview of the importance of soil carbon.
Sure. Soil carbon is obviously very important. We know that through agriculture practices, much data would suggest that we've lost up to half, if not more, of our soil carbon in our farmed and grazed soils, right? And so that loss has led to problems with increased atmospheric CO2, increased acidification of water bodies, along with lower productivity and greater challenges in growing food. And so, unfortunately, because of these things, carbon has become this huge target, and that's all we want to talk about, right? But it's part of a functioning system where we've got water and biodiversity and carbon that are all cycling together to grow plants and to grow animals.
Fantastic. So, can you take us through some of the fundamentals of soil carbon and what factors actually influence soil carbon in the soil?
Sure. So, we use often carbon and soil organic matter, which is often 50 to 72%, I think, 58 to
Yeah.
72% carbon as indicators of well-being of a system. And in doing that, um, we look at these metrics. Well, there's been this huge push now with supply chains and others that have said we're going to lower our carbon footprint. And one way of potentially offsetting that
Yeah.
footprint is by sequestering carbon and improving carbon in our agriculture soils.
Yeah.
And it's important that when we store carbon below ground, that it's not going to be destroyed by fire.
Yeah.
It can be a much more permanent component of our carbon budget, and so those things are all really important.
How significant is the potential of carbon storage in our soils?
The opportunity can be very high, and let's just say that most of the data that I'll see suggests that from a mineral associated or a more permanent organic matter storage perspective that we can see 10 to 12%
Yeah.
of carbon storage and mineral associated organic matter, and it begins to plateau. And most of our agriculture soils are 1 to 2.
Right.
So there's a huge opportunity of improving organic matter in soils. Most of the farm systems I see today, most all of them, farm and ranch and graze in a way, though, that probably doesn't facilitate that occurring. And so that's the big challenge, right? Is how do we uh, improve the way that we manage that can begin
Hmm.
to see these positive benefits to organic matter in our soils?
Yeah. And when we're talking about soils, what about like the soil texture, like our contents, our percentages of sand, clay?
Sure.
How does that impact it as well?
Yeah, generally at our site, we've been measuring for 15 years, and we will generally see greater carbon accrual and greater carbon associated with our loam to clay textured soils, silt loam to clay textured soils, much less in our sandier soils. And we are a very sandy area, right? And so generally, what you'll find is there's going to be more carbon associated with heavier
Yeah.
soils. We do still see improvements in those without question. The fact that we see less improvement in our sandy soils
Yeah.
is just there's less nutrients there, there's less water holding
Hmm.
capacity and other aspects. And so, generally speaking, the heavier those soils are,
Yeah.
the more that they can hold. And so that's the hard part. Then is that what is potentially happening from management versus what's just happening from texture.
Yeah.
And so when you go out and do considerable soil sampling, you're going to learn that you probably need to use texture as a covariate in that model that kind of begins to account for teasing out texture for what might have changed with
Yeah.
management.
Is there, how important, or I suppose from the soil health point of view, Is that an area of something that you need to focus on, or is it more from the cropping that the soil health supports healthy crops, supports a healthy root system?
Sure.
Or is there an aspect that it just focuses on soil health?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to looking at carbon and organic matter, it doesn't matter. Soil health, it doesn't matter if it's a cropping or a grazing system. It's all highly important.
Yeah,
Generally, our indicators of improved soil health are going to be improved soil respiration,
yeah,
which is actually CO2 cycling through that soil, improved microbial activity that leads to greater water absorption and utilization, as well as more accrual of carbon in those soils. And so, soil health is highly important. It's very can be very challenging to measure. We have a lot of different
yeah.
recipes for measuring that, as well as looking at more outcome-driven examples of soil health, which would be the differences in types of soil organic matter.
We see it more common now that our farmers are undergoing different soil analysis packages. It's no longer just the standard or NPK, magnesium, pH. We're now looking at they're measuring organic matter, they're measuring carbon. You having that data, what kind of decisions can they make next based on those figures? How do you use that data in decision making on farm?
Well, I think that if we make a decision that we're going to dramatically lower inputs,
Yeah,
let's say that might be nitrogen, for example, that we are now relying more on our soil biology to deliver nutrients to the rhizosphere of the plant.
yeah,
And in doing so, that would mean that we have to manage to improve that relationship between microbial activity and soil health and the nutrients being delivered. And so the decision that is made is going to drive that. So let's say I'm going to lower my inputs. I'm going to get rid of nitrogen.
yeah,
Well, what does that now look like? Well, it's going to be a standpoint of not only improving the biodiversity of the plants in my system, getting more nitrogen-fixing legumes, but now because of the fact that the higher amounts of nitrogen aren't negatively impacting soil biology, which we know that to be a pretty solid relationship in the literature. Therefore, as I see these improvements, it leads credibility to the management that is now becoming more resilient and less associated and less needy for those inputs.
When you speak about the management side of things, how can these different grazing management systems impact soil carbon, I suppose the potential in the sequestration side? Is
Yep.
there a correlation there?
Yeah. And so, first of all, I just want to say that when it comes to talking about soil carbon in the literature and grazing literature, there are many, it's not decided upon science, that there are many opinions out there. There's data that says that it can be substantial. There's other data that would suggest it couldn't. Part of that is, number one, soil carbon is difficult to measure in time and space. Okay, so that's one thing. Number two, often we just do this in very controlled research type environments versus on the ranch.
Yeah.
And so there can be definitely differences in management across those sites that can impact that. Time and space is just huge when you're trying to measure something so complex.
Yeah.
I don't know why we pick carbon because it's like the most challenging thing to measure. But with that said, we can see opportunities, I believe, in improved management and improvements in organic matter and potentially carbon, right? And even there, like putting that aside, just overall improved productivity. And what the data and what in our context, what we find is that as we have improved our recovery periods, as we have improved and increased our rotations, we tend to see improved productivity, greater forage productivity, versus say what I would deem to be more of like a continuously set stocked type of system. Generally, over time, those sites can become more mismanaged. There's more stress in the system, which then can begin to erode productivity. And in doing that, you're probably going to begin to see less opportunities for carbon to be cycling as well in organic matter, and then also in terms of overall soil carbon sequestration.
Yeah. A really important aspect of it is obviously the water filtration side of it and nutrient recycling. Is that from the grazing management point of view? How can we manage our systems that bit better to ensure that we're getting in that filtration side and then nutrient recycling?
Yeah, so I mean, just thinking about this, right? Like, if I can show you one system that may only infiltrate a half an inch or an inch of rain in an hour,
Yeah.
and then show you another system that could infiltrate 6 or 8 or 10 inches of rainfall in an hour,
Yeah.
and you get intense rain events, which one would you rather have? And we know that because of that, and through the improved organic matter in these systems, that we tend to see continually greater infiltration as well. And by doing that, and to me, that is like the match lighting the gasoline. That's the key in this, right? As water improves, as water cycling improves, a cascade of great things happen. We see more carbon built in the soil. I would argue that that water begets carbon.
Yeah.
That improved water cycling begets greater carbon and overall productivity in that system.
Yeah.
That as we infiltrate more water, we have greater recharge of our below ground aquifers. Many of our streams
Yeah.
are fed by aquifers. Many of our trout and salmon depend on cold water to function highly. And all of that, again, talks about how water cycling through our system. So if we've got a landscape that's running off water, it's taking nutrients with it, water's getting to where it shouldn't be, a lot of negative things begin to happen. And we see problems with our stream flows. We see problems with drought. In more arid landscapes, we see problems with desertification.
That's fantastic, Jason. We're going to bring it to a close there. Is there any last minute point or anything you'd like to leave our listeners with at this time?
I think that if I'm a farmer or rancher, right, I've got to pay my bills. And to me, I think the thing to focus on is improving soil health, not getting caught up in what this carbon number might look like or what the argument in the newspaper may be on if grazing does even impact carbon or not. But what we all can do is, I think, look at how we manage and how that impacts organic matter, right? And those things are really powerful and can improve a producer's bottom line. And so to me, focusing on those indicators of soil health are hugely important. And I think over time, the other aspects of how much carbon and what kind of management, I think research will begin to more aptly, show what can be done. And so it's but for me, I think soil health is a real key to focus on.
Thank you, Jason. That was fantastic. Thank you for joining us for the second part of our 3-part series of our Roots to Resilience Module 1, interviews with Jason Rowntree.